Let's get started, folks. Sue, would you please take roll?
Senator Boner,
Here.
Senator Hicks,
Excused?
Senator Jones,
Excused?
Senator Schuler,
Here.
Chairman Landon.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Just a couple of housekeeping things real quickly, committee. We did not have anyone streaming in this morning on a bill that was considered. And I just want to emphasize to those out across the state and elsewhere that there are time limits placed on when you can sign up to testify, and we have to have a cutoff point which comes into play once in a while. If you're unable to get on and visit with us via Zoom, each and every one of us have phone numbers and email addresses on the website. So I do encourage you to please weigh in, and don't feel like in any way we're trying to keep away from your testimony in any way. I appreciate seeing that we have a couple of folks streaming in today, and we look forward to those comments on whatever bill. Today we have this. We took these two bills up today, committee, not to either unduly promote them or unduly hinder them. Unfortunately, Senator Jones can't be here, so the idea is to get these bills up and moving. They are committee bills taken up by our TRW committee during the interim. So let's get started with the Senate File 3. Mule and white-tailed deer separate hunting seasons. In the interest of time, Senator, would you like to come up and visit with us about this bill to get started, or would you like to hear from the Game and Fish first? Are you okay on time?
I just tuned in on
We would sure take your testimony first, Senator. I know you've got to get to appropriations, and appreciate you taking time to come down and visit with us about this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, I don't even have a copy of the bill in front of me, although it's kind of an old friend of mine. This came out of the Wildlife Task Force. It's been a deal. I've come with a personal interest in it. I have spent my life living amidst large whitetail herds and irrigated grounds. And this merely, in my opinion, puts another tool in the box for Game and Fish that allows them to differentiate between prices and the way they do it. I don't think this bill forces anything. There's huge numbers of misconceptions out there about it, and that's really what I'm going to talk about quickly is, one of the big misconceptions, we're going to create a huge amount of new hunting pressure because we're going to split these licenses. Game and Fish has the absolute authority, and what my hope would be, but it's obviously I'm not on the commission, I'm not one of the department professionals, would be that the mule deer turn into a draw area and they maybe even redefine some of these areas. But we have really adequate and good mule deer numbers in a lot of the backcountry and Region A general. But these irrigated river corridors, the whitetail push them out and make them go away. And so for me, part of where I'm at, I can tell you on my ranch, we traditionally have 700 to 1,500 whitetail on our irrigated grounds and no mule deer. And we had disease came through, blue tongue EHD the last 2 years, decimated the whitetail numbers. I'm up to about 150 mule deer on the ranch now, about 100 of them on my irrigated ground. We love the mule deer, we love the whitetail, and my hope is to, via this bill and some other things, is to encourage mule deer recovery in some of these areas, which means that we probably do a draw area on one of them, and it necessarily means that actually we lessen hunting pressure because mule deer rut and whitetail rut do not happen at the same time. So those two seasons would likely not be like they are now in major overlap. They could be apart. I'll let the professionals talk more about it. But I really feel strongly, I'm a game lover. We live in the middle of game, and I am heartened. I hadn't seen good mule deer numbers almost since I was a child. And they moved in. As soon as the whitetail went, they started pouring out of the backcountry and coming in. They're staying alive and they're expanding. And, mine's not that I want them ad nauseum protected or one against the other, but I'd love to see us get to a 300 to 500 head mule deer herd, which the upper reaches of my ranch and a lot of the backcountry don't have any deer on it. The lions have kind of kept them down. And as these mule deer come, as the whitetail displace them, they'll move. So, mine is, this really doesn't do a lot of what all the big fear mongering is, but it gives the game and fish another tool in their chest. It also would allow them to differentiate license costs. And for the people that come in out of state, nearly all of them have better whitetail than we do. If you're coming out of the Midwest or you're coming out of the upper Midwest, they come here for a mule deer and they're willing to pay for it. And so it would allow Game and Fish to make those mule deer prices for non-residents much higher. And in the areas that we got too many whitetail, we could probably lower some of those license fees or maybe even let them take multiples if they needed to manage. But really to look, I've got a big stack of papers here. Game and Fish has been phenomenal getting me information. We're below herd objectives on both. We've been through a series of really bad drought years, really bad disease years. And I feel like it's really a good starting point that a lot of us would like to work together with them and say, let's do what's best for our resident hunters, for the non-resident hunters, but above all, let's use science and manage these deer herds using science. And anytime you combine and put two licenses in one thing and you say, we have this objective for whitetail, this for mule deer, and then you do a general license that you can shoot any deer on, that's actually not management. That's hoping for an outcome. And I really would like to see us sit down and say, let's look down the path and say, hand in hand, how do we enhance habitat and deer herds and make it better for everybody? I will tell you in the area we're in, if you look at the license numbers, and for the young folks, they don't understand it. Back to the 70s, I asked them for the deal. They were issuing 10,000 non-resident licenses in Cook County, 10,000. And I believe we're down to under 2,000 now. So it's how do we create this ability to handle more hunter impact, and we know we can do it, but find a way to do it better. And this, my hope, is to pass this on, and they can continue to do basically what they're doing. I hope they don't say that I'm making a misstatement, but I think they can still manage very similar to what they are now. And this just gives them more tools to be able to manage better. My other hope would be is that if we haven't done it, we allow it that on a mule deer tag, if it's a draw area, you're allowed to take a whitetail on it. And the word's out there, I hate whitetails. I don't. The one thing I know with my ranch, I can grow a whitetail herd in the dark. They'll fill in. I don't have to do anything. All we have to do is keep up. And when they hit about 700 head on my place, I no longer can manage them. They just run us over because they outstrip our ability to harvest does. So part of it's how do we keep it and how do we continue that population? So last piece I have is going back to science. We had kind of a run-in deal with guys coming at me and they started talking about science and what goes. And so a guy named Valerius Geist is probably the leading deer researcher the world's ever seen. And I can provide you with information, but his quotes repeatedly, both in his mule deer books and his whitetail books, he's an expert on both of them, is that left unchecked, mule deer and whitetail together, you're almost guaranteed to lose your mule deer. That any areas that you have major influx of whitetails, over time, the mule deer will disappear. The whitetail will take the prime winter habitat away. They'll drive the mule deer into tougher country, and then they're really prone to drought and overhunting. And we see that right now as this big herd I've got on my place. The hunters want to come in and kill the mule deer now. We don't have enough whitetail for all of them, so now they want to come kill mule deer. And we have not allowed any mule deer hunting on our place. So with that, I'd stand for questions and make a comment that I'm fully supportive of the Game and Fish guides and outfitters. And I think for resident hunters, if they really take a hard look at this, they're going to find out they come out the winner as well if we actually sit down and do honest objectives and manage.
Well done, Senator. I knew it would be. You do come from God's country, and it's always fun to talk about your place up there in the northeast part of the state. Way back when, I remember my family, sometime around Thanksgiving, would take a pilgrimage to your part of the world because that's the only place where we could hunt a whitetail. And that's not the case anymore, is it?
Mr. Chairman, no, but I think it will be. The whitetail are gonna come back. That's one thing I can tell you unequivocally.
Yeah.
Whitetail will come back. I'm not so sure about the mule deer, but the whitetail
Yeah.
they're gonna be back, and they're gonna be back. Hopefully, we could find a way to actually enhance the whitetail numbers as well by maybe redefining areas a little bit, forcing them into some of these different areas.
Yeah. Well, they have certainly moved out across the state, no doubt about it. I mean, you don't have to go to your neck of the woods to hunt a whitetail anymore. But committee, any questions of the good Senator, Senator Schuler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just kind of, Senator, if you could give me kind of an idea of the mentality of hunters when it comes to shooting a muley versus a whitetail. Not being a hunter, my husband and kids are all hunters. I wasn't. I shot one deer and I felt so guilty about it. I've never shot anything since. But is there a reason other than, going for the big antlers, for the mule deer? Does one taste different than the other? I mean, there's so many things I don't understand about why some people would prefer to have a muley over a whitetail. So can you kind of give me a little bit of background so I can understand this a little better?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Schuler, that's a phenomenal good question. It's really interesting. If you want to eat something good, there's nothing better than a whitetail that comes off corn or alfalfa. I mean, they're delicious, but interesting points this, when you look at them side by side, a huge whitetail buck looks like a small mule deer buck. They want to shoot the fork horns on us. They're 24 inches wide and they're four corner 3-point mule deer. They look huge. They're a 180-pound buck. Our good big whitetail bucks are 90 to 110 pounds. I mean, they're almost half size. People you get excited looking at mule deer, and I do too. They're fun. They're a lot bigger. Truth is, we see so few of them, you get to thinking they're elk when you look on our place because we just don't see them much. And so for the hunters, there's a definite choice there. The other thing we have, and I think it's what caused a lot of the controversy, is exactly what Chairman Landon said, is we have a tradition in the state of Wyoming that basically anybody that hasn't filled their deer tags, that's the last deer season open in the state of Wyoming. So we have a pilgrimage statewide of hunters that come to the Northeast Thanksgiving and on and come hunt. And I welcome them. We've got a lot of public ground. For us, they do me a lot of good. We've got literally a Rolodex of 100 people that come and kill does on us every year when we've got extra deer. Contrary to popular belief, other than some road hunting deals, I don't mind the influx. And I think that's where a lot of the problem is. These guys that haven't filled their licenses feel like we're trying to discriminate by taking away their ability to kill a mule deer on a general tag. And my deal is, if you want to come to Northeast Wyoming and Region A, I would hope the Game and Fish says, if we give them the ability that the mule deer tag is a draw tag and the whitetail tag would continue to be a unlimited tag for any Tom, Dick, and Harry that shows up. And if you have a mule deer tag, you can kill any buck you want, because I have no problem if they bypass a nice 4-point mule deer to kill a better whitetail.
Anything else for Senator Driscoll? And by the way, Senator, you served on that task force that we referenced a few times this morning, the Wildlife Task Force, and this in part came out of that. Appreciate your work then, and obviously all the work that we've done together through the years. Thanks for coming down.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you.
Thanks again for all the help.
Yeah. Let's hear from our department, guys. Appreciate the Game and Fish being here to visit with us a little bit about this bill. Good morning, good afternoon. Yeah.
Good morning, Chairman Landon. My name is Doug Raymeyer, Deputy Director with the Wyoming Game Fish Department. And this afternoon, Dan Smith, Chief Game Warden of the Wildlife Division, is joining me to talk through kind of the components of this bill and answer questions.
So, Deputy Director, if you, I'm just going to let you launch in and visit with us about this. First of all, you know, and I don't want to put the department on the spot in any way, but let me just lead you into a conversation about the bill by saying, where do we stand now with our ability to manage deer populations versus what this would do? What would this do to your ability to manage deer populations? Contrast the two for me.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, so this bill actually builds on what we do currently do. So there's a lot of the things that we are engaged in now. If you look at our deer regulations, there's a lot of type licenses that are created individually by the regional managers to put pressure on whitetail deer. So as Senator Driscoll mentioned, they do take off across the state. Their numbers are doing well. And so with all of our regions have a type of license that allows for additional pressure on whitetail deer. And all of that is in an attempt to try and afford mule deer a little more protection.
So the good senator referenced a couple of things, Deputy Director, and our chief game warden might want to weigh in on this too. But if we separate the species, does that give you anything that you don't have now? Would that give you the ability to single out, as he described, you know, based on rutting seasons and based on parts of the state in any way? Talk to me about that piece.
Yes, and Mr. Chairman, I'll take a stab at it and then turn it over to Dan. But our agency, as I mentioned this morning, our Publix really is, they're interested in an opportunity to hunt. And so we've always approached this from the standpoint of preserving that high level of hunting opportunity that is enjoyed by our Publix. And the current season structure that we have, we feel is a balance that way. And whenever we go back to our Publix, so we've looked at this over the last 40 years, different times, a couple times in the 80s, and then in the last decade, a couple more times internally talking, can we maximize, does it improve our chances of doing things? It does raise revenue for the department. Without a doubt, if we end up asking our hunters to carry 2 licenses, I don't know how many would carry 2, but it would cause more people to purchase a second license, so revenue would jump up. We would also be able to continue to do if the bill doesn't pass, we're already in that mode of maximizing that opportunity for whitetails, but keeping, mule deer pressure down. And a hunter can go into the draw system and pick up multiple tags, but they can only ever get 1 mule deer tag. And so the season dates that across the region, across the state that we adopt, they're pretty specific in how those managers feel that mule deer can sustain some level of take. And I think, and there's a lot of other changes within the agency that we can touch on and maybe that we'd have to make, but I'll let Dan go ahead and chime in.
And Mr.
Go
Chairman,
ahead, Mr. Smith.
Doug said we have tools in the toolbox that we are doing this. This would allow us, it would allow some expansion of those tools if we had species separated. It would allow somebody to carry 2 tags in their pockets where you could focus 1 tag specifically on whitetail deer. But within our current regulations, we have types, as Doug mentioned, we have different types of licenses. So we have 2 separate types already set aside that are only for whitetail deer. And as we've looked at this over at least the last 30 years, trying to improve and refine our management of mule deer and whitetail deer, we've found ways within the current system to make that work. And so whether or not the bill passes, we will continue to try to manage mule deer and whitetail deer to the best of our ability. And so there's pros and cons both ways.
And Mr. Chairman, I might add that, in the past, some of the, Senator Driscoll mentioned the 10,000 licenses. And so we have manipulated licenses, quotas for non-resident regions So Region A is often referenced, that's the Black Hills. And a lot of hunters that pick up that Region A tag, they come out and they know that that season is for both species. And yeah, they're targeting mule deer, but a lot of those folks go home with a white-tailed deer. And so if we, there's a little bit of a concern within some segments of our publics that if you split those two licenses, you're gonna have guys just pick up the mule deer tag, and then that's gonna put more pressure on them. And so we're gonna have to continue to monitor that or look at hunter crowding in some of these areas. Region A is infamous for having ability to grow deer. And we would have to really track how many people are there and what the level of take is, because we don't want, number one, hunter crowding. And we do want to make sure that we do have a little bit of more protection for mule deer than whitetail.
So if I understood it correctly from the senator, deputy director, that by that time of the year, when we get pressure up there in the northeast corner, the mule deer seasons are over. Am I remembering that correctly? And then, so that's why you can go up there and try to harvest a whitetail.
Yes, you have a perspective?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so we run both those seasons concurrently as long as we can. And I don't know if early on in the years we've adjusted it, but last year they ran to the 20th of November.
So you could take either species, whitetail or mule deer, all the way through the 20th of November.
Oh, okay. Well, this is just an aside, but I've got a lot of friends who are sportsmen, and I've been really proud of our hunters the last 2 or 3 years. Anecdotally, I've heard from several who have gone ahead and purchased their deer licenses, but they've chosen not to hunt the mule deer, and I'm really proud of that. I think that says a lot about Wyoming and, what we all stand for. And so there's a lot of that that's been going on. And anyway, go ahead, Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know you had some, I think they were called listening sessions just recently here with the mule deer situations. I couldn't get to the one that was in my region, but so actually 2 different things, I guess. What were some of the takeaways from those? And then have you guys ever polled the hunters to see what they think about this in terms of the 2 licenses? I'd be interested in hearing what your thoughts were on those.
Yes, Chairman
Chief or
Landon and
deputy?
Senator Schuler, I'm going to let Dan take the listening sessions on, and then I'll touch on the surveys that we've done over the last recent years.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman,
game
Senator
warden.
Schuler. So we did do listening sessions from late November through December, across communities all across the state, and we're still going through all that data. We actually have a person looking at that data and trying to pilfer out some of the information there that we can use. So we heard some things that we've heard before, limited quota seasons or antler restrictions. And we also heard some new ideas. And so we're gonna take all that together as we put our season setting. We set our seasons in March, take it to the commission in April. And so as we're putting those season recommendations together, we're gonna take that input from the communities and try to incorporate that into our season setting. So that's the first part.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chairman, so over the last 10 years, we've done a number of surveys, in the Black Hills and of our deer hunters. And so in 2023, local managers surveyed 440 landowners along with 1,500 Black Hills deer hunters. And that's those areas, Region A, Type 1 through, hunter areas 1 through 6. And when asked if there should be a separate hunting license required to hunt buck mule deer and buck whitetail deer, 64% of the residents in Crook and Weston County said no. 28% said yes, and 8% said not sure. No was the overwhelming response from non-residents as well. 75% of those non-residents preferred to not have that license type. Also, some other notable results from that survey: a third of the Black Hills landowners supported separating the seasons. In 2023, we also surveyed through the university's WISAC, and I can't remember the acronym, but the University of Wyoming Survey Analysis Group surveyed 7,100 participants that hunted deer in Wyoming. And in that case, we actually had 45% of those people said they would support it. 30% didn't really have an opinion on it, and 25% opposed it. Let's see, and then I think that was the only surveys that I'm familiar with at this point. And you may hear some other testimony on some other surveys and input folks have got on this harvest.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, just listening to those results, even if we were to pass this and distinguish between whitetail and mule deer, it doesn't necessarily, it would change the seasons in the Northeast one iota. Department could still run a conjunctive dual season, same time. And you might have to have a mule deer or a whitetail license would be the distinction, but you could potentially hold both. So in other words, the status quo would be maintained. The only difference is you would have to acquire 2 deer licenses instead of 1. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and Senator Hicks, that is correct. There'd be a need to have 2 licenses in your pocket. The concern, I guess, is from what we hear from our publics is that everybody that draws a type A license, Region A, there's going to be more pressure on the mule deer because that's the Western iconic species. That's what they want. They know whitetail tastes good, but they come west to try and get that mule deer.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up, and so that's a possibility. You could require 2 different licenses, but you currently do that now where you acquire a deer license and it has a different season for both. Could you still do that if we just distinguish between these 2 species? In other words, you purchase a deer license, but that deer is for either species for the same or concurrent season. It looks to me like that's perfectly possible too, even with the bill, because that's kind of what you do right now in a lot of areas around the state of Wyoming. Or would this force you to have to make those people buy 2 licenses? I think you still have the flexibility, but I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, Deputy, go ahead.
Yeah, so that would force those people to pick up that second tag. I mean, currently in our regulations, we do have the limitation is basically the little, when you look at the regulation book, it'll show you the opening date, closing date, and the limitation does exactly that. It tells those folks what species they can take during a part of that season. And that's how our local managers are limiting the take on mule deers, because the last part of the season, they'll just say any white-tailed deer, or throughout the entire season, there'll be any white-tailed deer, but only antlered mule deer. And if we change, if the regulation goes through, we would require all those folks to, pick up that tag and separate out
All right,
what they're
thank you.
pursuing.
So Deputy Director, you could, let's just stay up in the Crook County area. You could keep the whitetail season open, and in a given year, if you wanted to, you could just not allot any mule deer tags, right? I mean, you could still manage, regardless of what system we ask you to fall under, right?
Yes, Chairman Landon, that's true. We currently use Chapter 6, the commission regulation, to do just that. And, you look in these western hunt areas and outside of the Black Hills, they're starting to do that same thing. So you pick up that deer tag. If you want to go for some whitetail opportunity, there's a portion of that season that generally focuses on that. So totally available to do that now, the way we run our seasons.
Okay, thank you. Senator, you good?
I might add that, the things that we talk about internally is, revenue would be better. Harvest survey, so when you hunt a deer, a portion of everybody that's in that group of people that bought a license will be mailed a survey. And so if we had 2 populations of people that we know had whitetail deer licenses or mule deer licenses, your survey methodology would be a little bit improved in terms of acquiring a sample to determine how many people hunted. Because right now, when you survey, you're asking them a whole bunch of questions about both species. And so there's a little bit of an unknown there, but you got to kind of survey enough people to get that. That would be one of the other benefits. But there are a number of things that the agency would have to do. if you think about it, when we talked this morning about preference points, non-residents put in for a deer preference point. And so when we get to the point where we'd have a separate license, we'd have to determine how many of those folks want a whitetail preference point, how many of them are gonna want. And so there'd be some of that type of work and a lot of programming on our part to try and discern the license sales and all the, I guess, hardware and applications that go into managing those species.
Yeah, I appreciate you pointing that out. Well, thank you to the department. I'll let you guys sit back and we may throw a question at you a little bit later. Appreciate you guys being here. And we're going to go to some public comment or anyone else in the room that would like to visit with us about Senate File 3.
Thank
Okay?
you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Come on forward. Yeah. Good afternoon. Yeah.
I'm Joe Sandrini. I'm a retired game and fish employee. I had 33 years with them as a game warden biologist, 30 of those up in the Black Hills, where I manage the two largest, we call it St. Patrick, where the two deer herds occur together. This issue is separating statutorily mule deer and whitetail licenses, as Deputy Director Brimeyer mentioned, has come up multiple times. In fact, it started in the 70s. And back then it was just deer seasons. And they said, well, maybe we should separate something here to do them different. Well, they decided not to after looking at it 2 or 3 times because there were so many deer, whitetail and mule deer then, that it didn't matter. Then we had the winter of 79, winter of 83, 84, deer populations declined, and you get to the late 80s, and the department looked at this again. Do we need to do something different with mule deer and whitetail deer? And so there were 2 reviews, one in 87 and one in 89. And what those did is they essentially began to move us towards the system we have now. A system that works really well. It offers maximum flexibility for hunters, for landowners, and for wildlife managers. You know, when this idea comes up about separating mule deer and whitetail license, well, maybe that's just no brainer. They're different species. We should do this different. The problem is, and this is based on my experience and tons of reviews and things, is that, you know, essentially it's not going to address the problems that it's seeking to, which is to have more conservative mule deer harvest and more liberal whitetail harvest. Instead, it's just going to increase government regulations. And the thing is, it's going to have a ripple effect of a lot of unintended and undesirable consequences. And that's what happens when something is just kind of, oh yeah, it looks good, so let's do it without getting into the weeds on it. And I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but just to kind of get everybody on the same page, Game and Fish issues 2 types of deer licenses, general and limited quota. A general license, a person can use in any hunt area that's open for a general license, depending on the limitations. So it'll have season dates. It may say that you can kill an antlered mule deer, any whitetail, et cetera. So harvest of the different species can be separated on general licenses. Then there's limited quota licenses, of which there's 2 types that are valid just for whitetails. If those licenses go unsubscribed, then a hunter can pick those up after the draw. And so the current licensing system works really well. I also, in 2007, the department looked at this issue in the most depth that it has, and I chaired a committee that did that. And that led to a little bit of the refinement of what came out of the reviews in 87 and 89 to eventually give us the system that we have today. In 2018, the department looked specifically at what can we do to manage mule deer better? What can we do with hunting season structures? And so they looked at 9 different strategies, including separating licenses like we're talking about today. And their conclusion was, after a thorough review and analysis, the consensus of the report committee and our preferred course of action is to maintain the existing system of deer management, license issuance, and hunting season strategies in Wyoming. And again, why is it? Well, it gives hunters, landowners, and managers the most flexibility. So for example, a friend of mine a few years ago was out hunting deer in the sagebrush. He has a general license in his pocket. It's good for both species. Really nice whitetail hops up in front of him in a spot where you would not expect a whitetail, where we don't want whitetails.
he harvested that deer. He was happy, did us all a favor. If he had had to worry about what type of license he had in his pocket, he couldn't have done that. When it comes to first-time and inexperienced hunters, people, oh yeah, I can tell a whitetail and mule deer apart pretty easily. No, it takes some effort. And so a first-time hunter or an inexperienced hunter in a season where they can take both doesn't have to worry about it. Nebraska, a number of years ago, did a hunt where they specifically wanted to take whitetail. And so they issued licenses for that instead of separating, and they had 10% harvest of the wrong species. And that was experienced hunters. So even experienced hunters do make mistakes. When it comes to being a game manager, if I've got low mule deer numbers and high whitetail numbers, I can structure a general season that allows for very limited mule deer, like maybe we have a 7-day general season for mule deer, but I've got 30 days for whitetail. Plus, I can dump in the limited quota whitetail tags, and if they don't sell out, then guys can buy those and have them extra and come back. And then as a landowner, which I manage a couple ranches up there, I don't have to worry, if I've got mule deer and whitetail both on my place, which I do, I don't have to worry about making sure I have a paying hunter that comes in that has the tag that I need him to have to harvest what I need harvested. You know, I can say, okay, Bob, I give you permission to hunt mule deer, get after it. Frank, I give you permission for whitetail, get after it. And so because the Wyoming Game and Fish Department and Commission currently manages both deer species separately with different licenses and different season structures, then creating or separating them statutorily is just going to create more regulation. Because what's going to happen now, instead of one deer regulation, we're going to need 2, mule deer and a whitetail. Or we could say, well, we'll put them together like we did mountain goat and bighorn sheep. We reduced regulations, we went from 2 to 1, but you still have 2 sets of regulations. It's just under one number, right? Then we get into the issue of defining what is a whitetail deer and what is a mule deer. So there's going to need to be some sort of definition in those regulations and what happens when you get a hybrid. How do you tell them apart? Not that there's a lot of hybridization goes on, but and just as a matter of point, the word whitetail is not the correct term. It's white-tailed deer. That's how it's referred to in scientific literature. Whitetail is a synonym that's been used, and it's kind of a slang term and it's acceptable, but I would also suggest if this goes through, you get the correct language in there. Anyway, excuse me. Most hunters and landowners are opposed, especially in the Black Hills. The Black Hills is responsible for 1 out of every 5 deer harvested in the state annually. 10% of the mule deer harvest comes from up there, 35% of the whitetail harvest. If you combine that with the east front of the bighorns, we're probably talking about 40% of the entire deer harvest in the state. And so this idea, while it might not affect things very much in the western side of the state, it'll have a dramatic impact where most of the deer in the state are harvested. When we surveyed, and Deputy Director Rimmeyer referred to the survey up there, most of the hunters that hunt up there do not want this. Most of the hunters that hunt up there just want to hunt a deer. And the landowners up there, when we surveyed the landowners in 2010 and again in 2023, they're 2 to 1 opposed to having separate season dates for the different species and spreading that hunting season out longer and having them in longer hunting seasons. Most of them, 2/3 of them and 2/3 of the hunters, both deer species are important to them. They want to be able to hunt them together at the same time. Game and Fish can manage the harvest levels between those on how we structure the seasons already. And again, so it's not going to accomplish what the proponents want, which is to reduce mule deer harvest and increased whitetail harvest. In fact, I would suggest it'll do the exact opposite. And so if you consider the fact, okay, if a person can have 2 buck licenses, a whitetail and mule deer, okay, then, all right, September seasons are open on the western side of the state. I'm going to take my mule deer tag and go over there. We get to November when the season's on the eastern side of the state. I'm going to take my whitetail tag and go over there. Oh, wait, I didn't fill my mule deer tag on the other side of the state. So now I'm going to hunt a mule deer and a whitetail in the hills. We used to have 2 buck seasons in the late 50s through the 60s and into the 70s, and they were not sustainable. That's why we don't have them anymore. The other thing is it would make controlling whitetail numbers more difficult. It's been said in here, most of the non-residents come out to hunt a mule deer. They're happy to take home a whitetail. The thing is, non-residents are responsible for 75% of the doe harvest. So if they're not here, and that's because most of the whitetail are on private land, and those folks are willing to pay the access fees and go in and manage those deer. If we can't draw them out here because they can't hunt a mule deer, we lose that cadre of hunters to take does and fawns. When we're at objective in the Black Hills, I ran the numbers. If we were going to maintain the harvest levels that we had when we're at objective, a non-resident would only have a 40% chance of drawing a mule deer tag, and we would have over 2,000 whitetail tags left that go unsold for non-residents. The unsold tags, where do those folks hunt? Most of them end up on public land because they look, oh, there's unsold tags. I'm going to go there. I haven't found a place to hunt. I'm not willing to pay, and we increase crowding on the public land. And I'm going on, I don't want to go on too much longer, but just to summarize, the 2018 Wyoming Game and Fish Department Mule Deer Hunting Report, again, it looked at specifically separating mule deer and whitetail licenses, and the conclusion was, and I quote, "Moreover, the Wyoming Game and Fish Department already uses various strategies where needed to manage mule deer and whitetail harvests independently." And it concluded, "These licenses and season strategies are sufficient to provide additional whitetail hunting while maintaining conservative mule deer seasons." And so I guess to summarize, again, we could go to lunch and I could spend a couple hours. I mean, I've spent years working on this stuff.
I'm concerned about your passion, level, but please continue.
Yeah, so just to sum it up, I guess I would ask you, why do we need another law? Another law that's only going to expand government regulations while limiting hunters, landowners, and wildlife managers in ways that aren't needed and aren't wanted, and yet may serve to put more money in the game and fish coffers, but at what? The expense of some freedom, some choice, and some management flexibility. And honestly, to me, that doesn't sound like the way most Wyomingites want to be governed. I would be more than happy to take any questions, and I know we're going late. I've got a ton of stuff, so I tried to keep it as short as I could, but
Joe, thank you. Really appreciate all the info and appreciate you being here. So you live up in Crook County?
yeah, I'm in Senator Driscoll's district and Representative Williams's district. Live about 10 miles north of Newcastle.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Any questions of one of our former game wardens? Okay, appreciate it.
Yep, thank you.
Further testimony, we're on Senate File 3. We're talking muleys and whitetails today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good opportunity to be back.
White hyphen tail.
That's right.
Yeah, there we go.
Bill Novotny here on behalf of the Wyoming Outfitters and Guides Association. And we've actually had a change of heart on this bill. We opposed it in the previous session, and I'm here now to share with you our support for the bill and hope that you will move it through the process. And we hope that it doesn't run into the buzzsaw that it ran in on the House side 2 years ago. So, or I guess it was a year ago. But we are in support of the Game and Fish having this authority. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Novotny, thanks for coming back for this one. Do we have any questions for the guides? Go ahead, Senator Schuler.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Novotny, because I've been thinking about it too, just, I can't remember what submarine did over there on the other side, but if I were a hunter, which I'm not, but I would think that, a bill like this would give me, two different opportunities to kill two different species. And knowing that, of course, there are going to be some hunters out there that are looking for the big antlers and that sort of thing. But do you feel like most of the outfitters that you work with would think that a majority of the hunters would probably pick up the two tags? Or do you think some of them are just going to stay with, we're going for the trophy bucks and that's it? Any idea on that?
Mr. Novotny, go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman, Senator Schuler, what's unique about folks that come to Wyoming or even Wyoming residents who utilize Outfitters is that they come for a variety of reasons. You have folks who've saved up points for years for opportunity. When you look at the relative costs of a license between the states around us, they're relatively similar. So it's really that product and that experience. And so I do think that when folks are coming here, they're wanting that world-class opportunity to be out in Wyoming for a world-class deer hunt of our iconic species. And then also you have some folks that come here purely because they would like to hunt a whitetail in Wyoming as part of their effort. So I don't think it's going to impact the types of clients that we see or the folks that are going to want to come to Wyoming and have that opportunity.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate you being here. Yeah, please come forward. Good afternoon.
Chairman Landon and Senator Schuler and committee members. My name's Cindy Barlow. I own and operate Antelope Creek Outfitters. I'm one of 6 women outfitters in the state of Wyoming, actively hunting every single year. I really appreciate this gentleman's feedback that he gave to you. He was very accurate in what he presented. And opposed to what the Outfitters Association is saying, in talking with my hunters just this last year, the costs are becoming so exorbitant that we are going to begin losing our out-of-state outfitters or hunters coming into state. And like the good gentleman said, it's becoming so expensive to be able to hunt our wildlife. And he also pointed out so eloquently that the mechanisms are already in place for management. In my area specifically, up in Buffalo, mule deer alone begins October 15th and then is done by the end of October. If we want to hunt a late season whitetail, we can do that into November. But that mule deer season is very, very small. So may we recognize what we already have on our books. I'm all for management. This year with the fires, I have to tell you, as an outfitter, I even went to my hunters and said, listen, because of the pressure, because of what they've experienced, we should reconsider our hunt this year. I didn't hear a whole lot of feedback from the Wyoming Game and Fish that wanted to really limit some of that. And no disregard to the good gentleman here, but I think we have to look at all impacts and what's going on with our herds. So with that being said, I can't say it much better than that gentleman did here today. I stand opposed to this because we already have the mechanisms in place. Let's not increase government, let's not increase the spending. And in fact, it does more to put money into the coffers of the Game and Fish than it really does help to manage our wildlife. I stand for any questions.
Ms. Barlow, thank you. Appreciate it. Any questions for one of our guides? Thanks for coming.
Yep.
Thanks for
Thank
being
you,
here.
Phil.
We really appreciate it. Anybody else in the room like to testify on this one? Would anyone else like to come forward? Okay, let's go to those who are streaming in this afternoon. We do have a couple of folks. Mr. Heddick, is that, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Can we bring him on board? And Mr. Murtorp and Casper is on deck. How about that? We could actually bring them both in, Sue, if you can. And we'll hear from both those gentlemen.
Mr. Heddick is already up.
Okay, Mr. Heddick, are you there?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, he's declined.
He declined. I guess that's a decline. Oh, here we go. Okay. Buzz, are you there? Mr. Heddick? If you could unmute and weigh in, we'd love to hear from you.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, there we go.
Finally.
Yeah.
I have to press enough buttons I can finally get in here.
Okay, you're all set. Welcome.
All right,
this
sounds good. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It's going to be pretty tough for me to do a better job than Mr. Sandorini did, but I'm co-chair for Wyoming Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. representing several hundred hunters in the state. We also have talked to a lot of our people, and they're also opposed to this bill. And it's for the same reasons. I mean, the Game and Fish already has the ability and the authority to do this with license types. We can do type 3, 6, 7, and 8s, and allow additional pressure or harvest on the whitetails. And the big thing for me when I look at these bills, you know, is it really going to have the desired outcome? And I look at this one and say, no, it's going to have just the opposite effect. And I'll tell you why is because people like me that have not shot a mule deer in like 14 years in Wyoming, it's been a long time since I have. And I will tell you that one of the main reasons I don't is because with that general tag, I have the ability to be very, very, very selective on a mule deer buck and then take that license and go hunt a whitetail on it. And I hunt whitetails, like they've said, because they are very good eating. I really enjoy hunting them, and I don't really feel like I'm shooting the last dodo bird or whatever you want to say. When I shoot a mule deer, I just feel like I'm probably doing more harm to that herd than I am good. So I don't do that. However, if you put a limitation on my license and tell me that all I can shoot is a mule deer, I'm going to be a lot more likely to fill that tag on a buck that I normally wouldn't. And I think there's a lot of hunters like that out there. And so for those reasons, and, you know, after, again, like I say, talking to a lot of people across the state, I've also talked to a lot of the game and fish biologists. I have not really heard of a shred of support for this from anybody. And so for those reasons, because you can already manage them separately anyway, with license types, season length, that kind of thing, we are just very much opposed to this. And we've opposed it several times already. And our position has not changed, and my position is not going to change. So that's all I have, and with that, I'd stand for any questions.
Okay, Mr. Hedrick, thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
Any questions? Okay, thank you much. Let's let Jeff in this afternoon, and somebody from my neck of the woods. Yeah. Mr. Mortor, can you hear us? Are you on board yet?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We sure can. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. You're coming in strong. So that's awesome. If you can video screen, that's all well and good, but at least we can hear you. So.
Yeah, let's see. How about I don't know about the screen.
Hey, you know, I know what you look like. I'm sorry these three don't. You're with me, but please take it away. We're anxious to hear your thoughts on Senate File 3.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This is a tough act for me to follow. Mr. Sandrini, Buzz, and that nice lady that sat there and made her case so well. It really doesn't leave me a whole lot to say. I'm definitely opposed to this. I've sat in front of a TRW several times opposing it, and I fully believe the Game and Fish is completely capable of managing deer however they want. If they want to increase, decrease numbers, if they want to slack off on the mule deer, they're fully capable. And they have all the tools, the types of licenses, and including the general. And I'll probably end with that. And I have started in the last 4 years or so taking grandkids up in our general area here near Casper. And our area has both whitetail and mule deer. And this would be a tough one, because if I have 4 hunting grandkids right now that are over the age of 12. And if I'm going to take my grandkids up into an area that has both types of deer, I don't want to buy 2 licenses for all 4 of them. I like the idea of that one license. And if a whitetail buck jumps up, go after it, you know. So I really like the way our system is. I know it's more than adequate because I care about deer, whether they're mule deer or whitetail. Those same grandkids, their first deer were buck whitetails. So we're fond of both, and I definitely would like to see the mule deer come back. I hope we see it someday, and I don't want to see a situation where we have completely dedicated general licenses for mule deer, because I think it'll end up putting more pressure on those bucks.
Jeff, thank you. Really appreciate you taking the time to weigh in this afternoon.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, see you back home someday. Okay, anyone else online that I missed, Sue? Okay. I'm going to close public testimony on this bill. Committee, what's your pleasure? Senator Hicks.
Can I ask the department a question?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Would you guys be willing to come forward real quick just to clear up any misconceptions or?
So the question I have is you alluded to the fact that you had done some more recent surveys with some of these listening meetings statewide. I'm not talking about just regional, because we don't write regional regulations for one little corner of the state. They have applications statewide. But what were the results from that as far as the, when you asked the question, are you in favor of splitting the seasons? Could you reiterate those numbers for me?
So, Mr. Chairman and Senator Hicks, so there was a couple different surveys. So we did the listening sessions in 35 communities, I believe it was 35 or 38 around the state, and Dan can address that. We did two different surveys in 2023. One was through WISAC at the University of Wyoming, where they contacted 7,000, a little over 7,000 hunters. And those hunters, it was, of those 7,000, 45 supported it and 25% opposed it. Also in 2023, we did a survey
Deputy
of
Director, can you give that to me again? In that 7,000 survey?
7,187 participants. And those were people that had hunted deer in the last 5 years, I believe it was. And 45% supported this type of season, and then 25% opposed. And there was 30% that neither opposed or supported it. And that was the question was, do you support or oppose separate licensing for mule deer and white-tailed deer? The other survey that was completed also in 2023 was 440 landowners, and along with 1,500 Black Hills deer hunters. And these are areas 1 through 6 hunters that participated in deer seasons in that part of the state.
Real quick, those landowners are all up in the northeast corner?
Those are all Black Hills landowners.
So this is regional specific, these
Yes.
numbers?
Yes. And at that time, the field personnel, which was Joe, had a survey and they wanted to get at the root of this again. It was something that they had been tracking for a while with, just their individual contacts. So they kind of knew the perspective they were going to get from folks there. But of those 440 landowners and the 1,500 deer hunters, they were asked the same thing. Should a separate license be required to hunt buck mule deer and buck white-tailed deer in the Black Hills? Crook and Weston County residents answered, 64% of them said no. So the people that reside there did not want to see that. 28% said yes, and 8% were not sure. And then of those, only a third of the landowners, so 30%, and I don't know the exact percentage, but 30% of the landowners did not support that as well.
So 30% did not support having different seasons?
Only a
which mean-
third of landowners supported doing that.
Supported, okay.
So the other 2/3 not supported it.
Got it. So, Chief, it sounded like something that I grew up understanding, and that is that the landowners themselves can differentiate. In other words, when they have hunters visit them and ask if they can come on their property to hunt, they can direct them, yeah, I'll let you hunt a whitetail, and they're doing that right now, are they not?
Mr. Chairman, yes, they do have the ability to do that, and I think Senator Driscoll alluded that on his property, that late in the season, they only allow whitetail hunting. And so, yes, landowners have that ability to regulate what species can be hunted on their property.
Yeah, thanks. Anything else, committee? Welcome back, Senator. Good to have you. Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate it. All righty, we are discussing Senate File 3. We've had great testimony this afternoon. What is your pleasure, committee? What's your pleasure on this bill?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Hicks.
I'm going to explain. I don't represent Crook and Weston County. I represent the western part of the state, and I got a pretty good idea how most of my constituents feel about this. Having a county that starts with S, that has a large organization, that has an emphasis on mule deer. I'm going to move the bill because we come back to, the statewide surveys, there's much more support for this than there is. And I understand the issue up in Crook and Weston, but that's not who I represent, Mr. Chairman, so I will move the bill.
Okay, it's been moved by Senator Hicks. Discussion. Any discussion? Senator Schuler.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate all the testimony, and I've thought about this, because we worked it quite a bit last year. I think about all the hours that the Wildlife Task Force spent on this too, and as the good senator, mentioned, I'm on the west side as well, and we don't have as big an issue with the whitetail over there. We just don't. Not to say that there aren't some. I see a few here and there, but I look at this more as it's kind of like this. This morning we talked about encouraging young folks to get out and hunt, and being a part of Wyoming and figuring out that there's really something more out there to do than sit on your phones and fiddle around. I look at this as a way to maybe not just manage the mule deer population, but possibly to encourage more people to get out. And in talking with some of the folks in my area, a couple of the people that were opposed to the bill this morning were really in favor of this. And they were like 30, 40-something year olds, and they really like this. And they said, we'll buy two, and we want more hunting opportunities, and we want to get our kids going. So I would vote to support it as well. Thank you.
Anything further? Senators to my right. I really have appreciated everyone weighing in today. I had a little catching up to do on this bill. I've been away from travel, recreation, and wildlife for a couple of years. But as quickly as I could, I reached out to my constituents, and they don't see a need for this bill. And they believe, and I have come to believe, that the Game and Fish can manage these species just fine the way it is. I think they can monitor and manage and control populations, and I think everybody in the room is hoping that our mule deer can make a comeback, and I know the department is working as hard as they can to try to make that happen. We'll continue to do that. I just don't see this as a way to help. So that's where I'll be on the bill. I can't support it today. Appreciate all the work that's gone into it, but I just can't support it. So, are you ready for a question on the bill? Question on the bill. Sue, would you take roll on Senate File 3?
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for Senate File 3. Senator Boner.
Aye.
Senator Hicks.
Aye.
Senator Jones.
Aye.
Senator Schuler.
Aye.
Chairman Landon.
No.
Mr. Chairman, 4 ayes, 1 no.
Okay, Senate File 3 has passed the TRW committee and will go upstairs to the floor. Who would like to carry this one?
Mr. Chairman, I nominate Senator Driscoll.
Yeah, that's right. Well, these two good senators who worked this during the interim, they have a wealth of knowledge that I don't have, so. Now, I could carry this for us.
I think we vote no on you.
Yeah. Who wants to take it?
I think Senator Driscoll would be great.
I think Senator might be interested. We should offer about terms.
Well, let's offer it
If
that
not,
way.
if not, I would.
I vote for him too.
Yeah, okay, thanks, you guys. All righty. Okay, thanks, committee, appreciate it.